Ali Khamenei. The 2026 conflict began with a decapitation strike on February 28 that killed Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in his Tehran residence. International legal experts have raised grave concerns over the legality of targeting a sovereign head of state in a private dwelling. The strike, which also killed several aides and family members, is viewed by many as an extrajudicial execution that bypassed the UN Charter's regulations on the use of force, effectively turning the conflict into a war of choice rather than self-defense. The Minab school strike. On February 28th, a U.S. Tomahawk missile struck the Shajare Tayyebe primary school in the city of Minab. At least 175 students and teachers were killed in the blast. While the U.S. military later admitted the strike was based on outdated intelligence intended for a nearby IRGC base, human rights organizations have labeled it a war crime. The failure to verify a target in a dense civilian zone is a flagrant breach of the principle of precaution under the Geneva Conventions. The images of children's school books scattered among the rubble have galvanized global sentiment against the U.S. intervention. The destruction of cultural heritage. In early March, U.S. and Israeli airstrikes caused significant damage to ancient Iranian landmarks. Reports confirmed the partial destruction of the Golestan Palace in Tehran and the Chehel Sotun Palace in Isfahan. The 1954 Hague Convention strictly prohibits targeting cultural property. International observers have compared these strikes to the 1914 burning of the Library of Louvain, arguing that the destruction of Iran's millennial history is an attempt to erase the national identity of its people. The assassination of Qasem Soleimani. The 2020 drone strike on General Qasem Soleimani at Baghdad International Airport remains a landmark case of alleged extrajudicial execution. The UN Special Rapporteur declared the killing arbitrary and illegal as it occurred on the soil of a third-party country, Iraq, without its consent. This strike shattered the norm against assassinating high-ranking state officials of a sovereign nation. For Iran, it was a death warrant for diplomacy, and for the U.S., it was a strategic move that legal experts argue bypassed every established rule of the UN Charter regarding the use of force. The siege of life-sustaining infrastructure. As of mid-March 2026, the U.S. campaign has shifted toward infrastructure paralysis. Systematic strikes on fuel depots, electricity grids, and water desalination plants have left over 3 million people displaced. Under Article 54 of Protocol 1, it is prohibited to attack objects indispensable to the survival of the civilian population. The UN has warned that by cutting off clean water in southern Iran, the U.S. is effectively using starvation and disease as a weapon, mirroring the devastating effects of the WWI naval blockades. Retaliatory atrocities. For a complete history, the actions of the Iranian military must be included. In retaliation for U.S. strikes, Iran has launched drone swarms into civilian desalination plants and residential districts in Kuwait and Bahrain. UN Resolution 2817 condemned these attacks as egregious violations, noting that targeting the infrastructure of neutral neighbors is a war crime. These actions show that in 2026, just as in 1914, the laws of war are often the first casualty of escalation. The drone attack on Fairmont, the Palm, Dubai. In a drastic expansion of the theater of war, a coordinated drone swarm struck the Fairmont, the Palm Hotel in Dubai on February 28th during the opening waves of the conflict. The attack resulted in several civilian casualties and ignited a massive fire on the luxury Palm Jumeirah waterfront. Legal analysts point to this as a clear violation of the principle of distinction, which requires combatants to distinguish between military objectives and civilian objects. By targeting a world-renowned luxury hotel in a non-belligerent nation, the strike echoed the 2008 Mumbai attacks, missile strikes on international airports. Between March 1st and March 5th, the systematic targeting of major aviation hubs, including Dubai International and Kuwait International, effectively severed the umbilical cord of global transit. On March 1st, suspected strikes on Dubai's Terminal 3 injured airport staff and forced a total grounding of Emirates flights. Under the 1971 Montreal Convention, such attacks on civil aviation infrastructure are classified as international crimes. Beyond the immediate loss of life, these strikes have been described as a kinetic blockade, paralyzing the movement of refugees and humanitarian aid, mirroring the scorched earth tactics used to isolate urban centers during the 20th century's largest conflagrations. Strikes on commercial shipping and tankers. The 2026 conflict reached a maritime breaking point on March 11th when Iranian forces targeted at least 3 civilian commercial ships, including the Thai-flagged Mayuri Nari in the Strait of Hormuz. These actions violate the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea and the San Remo Manual on International Law. The deliberate shelling of merchant vessels, often belonging to neutral nations, has been labeled by maritime experts as economic economic terrorism. The resulting engine room fires and missing seafarers underscore a return to unrestricted warfare that seeks to starve global trade into submission, reminiscent of the 1917 naval crises, attacks on financial hubs and digital infrastructure. On March 19th, the conflict evolved into the digital and economic realm as kinetic strikes targeted the Dubai International Financial Center and critical data centers. These attacks were designed to trigger a cascading collapse of the regional banking system. International law experts argue that targeting the nervous system of a nation's economy constitutes a breach of the prohibition of indiscriminate attacks, as the resulting hyperinflation and loss of assets disproportionately harm the civilian population. This strategy of financial decapitation represents a modern evolution of the 19th century siege mentality, where the goal is to break a nation's will by dismantling the structures of modern life. If you want to see more videos like this, like and subscribe.